All right, so we heard some very sobering statistics there from Stats SA. The one that stood out for me most was 9.1 million people, not in education, not in employment, not in trading. What role does the business community have to play in this? I'd like to call Mr. Milton Nkosi back onto stage to discuss this with his panel. Professor Bonang Mohale, who is the President of Business Unity South Africa, Mr. Kganki Matabane, who's the CEO of the Black Business Council, Mrs. Phuthi Mahanyele-Dabengwa, who's the CEO of Naspers South Africa, and our last panelist today on that, my apologies for that, was supposed to be Ms. Daphne Mashile-Nkosi. She has been replaced though. Could we please ask all the panelists to make their way to their stage? Mr. Mashudu Netsipale is the CEO at Kalagadi, Manganese, who will be stepping in that position. A round of applause for our panelists, please, as they make their way to the stage. Please do remember, as the panelists make their way, that if you have any comments or questions, whether you're in the room or you're watching us online via our Facebook or YouTube panels, the hashtag to use is NBF21. Will pose your questions to the panelists, time dependent.
Is there social distancing?
Strong enough to travel that far. But thank you very much. Shall we start? It's great to have you here. You've been introduced already. And even on this panel, which is the rebuild panel. So we heard what the problems are, what the diagnosis was, and now we're looking for solutions. So it's great to see you, Professor Mohale. In the last session of Reflect, we heard about what the ills of the economy are in South Africa. But here in this session, we are seeking to find solutions. As President of Business Unity South Africa, what do you think needs to be done to take us to that elusive 5% economic growth? And how can business best position itself for a post-COVID recovery? Please give me that in 30 seconds, if you can.
So I got vaccinated on the 11th of July and had my second jab on Monday, the 23rd of August. So if you love life as much as I do, at least the people who are on the line and my colleagues in the room will make sure that we get vaccinated. Because that's how we are going to attain global competitiveness. Because you see, vaccine rollout was always going to be a race. Because the country that can claim to have defeated this pandemic first will reap the pent-up global tourism demand. Why does tourism matter? Because pre-COVID, 10.2 million people visited us, representing 9.8% of the national GDP. The first week of national lockdown, that number came down to 7.5% and going down. Absolute numbers, 3.2 million, going down. Therefore, tourism is important to us. One, because it employs more women than any other sector. The second, I think, let me be absolutely upfront about it. I think as a country, South Africa is the most under-marketed and mismarketed continent in the world. So for us to reach our potential, not even our fullest potential, all of us need to talk up this country honestly, openly, transparently, like Alcoholics Anonymous, be the first to admit our mistakes, but go on to palette, highlight, and celebrate God's own country, blue skies, African sunshine. Nkosi.
Thank you so much, Professor Mohale. I'll then move to Kganki Matabane, who's CEO of the Black Business Council. Always slightly confused with the BBC, my previous employer. It's good to have you here, my brother. I love the salt and pepper. What is the view of the Black Business Council? What's your priority list for our economic recovery and reconstruction plan? How do we rebuild South Africa's business and investment landscape for an economy that benefits all South Africans?
Thank you very much for the question. And to answer my question, I think I'll go back to the then deputy president of the country in 1998, when he said, South Africa is divided into two nations, one being black, struggling, the second one being white and privileged. And then he asked a question, a pertinent question then, that we can choose, remember that is 1998, 23 years since his speech. And he said we can choose to either answer that question honestly and frankly, or we can say, no, we are fine. We are fine, everything is fine, and then we move on. Or we can confront the question and say, for us to move from these two nations, what is it that we need to do? And actually go and do it. But if you do an evaluation and analysis 23 years later, I suspect we chose the easier route of saying, no, we are South Africans, we are fine, let's let life go on and go on. But when you look at what actually happens, for example, we are sitting here 27 years into democracy, 65% of senior executives are white, and white males to be specific. We've got 74% youth unemployment, and majority of them are black. During the COVID relief funding, 75% of the funds of the 200 billion loan guarantee scheme, the percentage that was used, went to white companies, which tells me that we did not confront our history honestly and frankly. Because maybe when some people are raising these issues, others feel uncomfortable, then we say, no, let's go back to South Africa. South Africa is good. But for us, the issue is that we are not having the right conversations because maybe we're trying to please one person or the other. And until we have the right conversations, we are not going to get the right answers. And the answers that needs political will to implement. If you look at, for example, small businesses, there are things that are easy to do. I'll give you an example if you want to grow the economy and recover, especially small and black businesses. We just need to pay them on time. But if you look, there are various reports that government prepares that some of the companies get paid after a year. If you are running a small business, you are basically basing your operations on the cash flow that you receive. If you don't receive the cash flow this month, it means you are gone. Those are some of the small issues that we're supposed to be doing. The second one is, if you look at how transformation is implemented, we chose the easier route of ticking boxes. We are not implementing the spirit of transformation. To say, ultimately, black people are 80% of the country, the economy, ownership, management, control should actually ultimately reflect that. But we are saying, no, let's tick a box, let's appoint a black woman here, and I'll get so many points. Let me appoint a person living with disability here, I'll get so many points. If we continue at this trajectory, we will probably maybe have the economy reflecting the population or the demographic maybe in 200 years. Is that what we want? We may not even get there because I'm sure the young people who are unemployed will then decide, let's render this country ungovernable.
Thank you very much. Let me bring in Phuthi Mahanyele-Dabengwa as the CEO of one of the country's largest companies, Naspers SA. what considerations should be put in place for monitoring and evaluating the progress of South Africa's economy? For instance, the World Bank dropped its doing business study recently. Should we be putting in place new measures for development and success?
Well, thank you very much, Milton, for the question. I think we certainly need to be looking at measures to look at how we look at our success. You know, and it's going to take collaboration. It's not something that the private sector can do on their own or the public sector can do on their own. We need to work together. And I think I'll take from the comment that that was made from the gentleman from the statistician, where he spoke about NEET. The people who are not employed, not educated, and etc. So our focus as Naspers is on dealing specifically with that area. So what we are doing is we're looking at the fact that South Africa right now is a net importer of digital skills. And so what we are focusing on is on training young people with digital skilling, and then we immediately place them in employment. And this has taken collaboration because we're working with corporates, other corporates around South Africa who require digital skills. You know, whether you're talking in banking or whatever industry it is, digital skills are required. And so we've set ourselves a target to be able to train and place in employment 10,000 young people. And so what we're doing every year, we're employing and training 1,500 young people, and we place them in these digital roles. And it doesn't matter whether the young person is a university graduate or it's a person who's got a high school education. There are different digital skills that they can learn. You take the young person, you place them in the skilling, and then you're able to then make them, become an economic dividend to the country. And so I think if we look at such measures for ourselves and say, let us look at education and look at employment, and how do we deal with these areas in order to bring South Africa forward? Those are some of the areas that we can look at, and that is where we are focusing right now.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me bring in Mashudu, who is Mashudu Nechipale, who's the COO of Kalagadi Manganese. You are in the resources sector. You heard what Naspers SA is trying to do. As miners, people in the resource sector, you are at the coal face of it. Especially in terms of employment levels as well. How can your sector dig deeper to close the unemployment gap to support the economic recovery and reconstruction plan?
Thanks, Milton, for the question, and maybe firstly apologies from the chairman of Kalagadi Manganese, Ms. Daphne Mashile-Nkosi. Unfortunately, due to personal commitments, she couldn't make it. I'm sure she would have answered this with a lot more flavor and vigor, given the efforts she has spent the last 15, 20 years trying to build Kalagadi Manganese as a black woman in South Africa in a mining sector. That on its own is quite an achievement. I think as a mining industry, and as I was requested to step in, it reminded me of 2015, when as partners, government, labor, communities, the mining industry, the state-owned enterprises, we spent a full month on mining Pakistan, looking at how do we inclusively think around improving what we have in the ground such that it creates further employment for the country. Now we spent a full month. This is paid for by the government with developed plans. We're South Africans, we're very good at developing plans and coming up with visionary strategies. However, if we just reflect on where we are today, for a mining company to run, whether you're in Australia, whether you are in Ghana, whether you are in Turkmenistan, doesn't matter. Infrastructure is critical, whether it be logistics, whether it be electricity, whether it be water. So where we find ourselves today, if you look back at the initiatives we developed as partners in 2015, we've actually materially regressed. We used to talk about a Transnet that was breaking records probably 3 years back. Today, we're probably talking almost 5 years ago performance levels. To an industry that earns significant export revenue for the country, no matter how you look at it, there is no growth that you're going to get if the logistics supply chain is not working. That's the fundamental thing we need to fix. There is no point in talking about growing anything. We just first have to get that right and working correctly. If we talk about the power issues, we took too long to get into the willing conversation where industry is able to produce its power. Again, this was a matter that was agreed in 2015, mining Pakistan already. We agreed that in order to enable ESCOM and assist in generating power, and therefore assist mining industry, in the market that prices were rising, we needed to allow industry to generate power. It took us more than 5 years to pass that policy framework alone. So forget about the plans. We create great plans. The South Africans, inclusive, I think we're quite inclusive on how we try to go about it, whether it be NAVCOC, whether it be BUSA, we try to be as inclusive as we can. Maybe partly that slows us down in terms of implementation. But if you ask me as an executive today what worries me, I've got foundries in Uppington. My IDC colleague was talking about small businesses. That foundry needs to produce close to 10,000 grade bars. I don't know, people might not know what a grade bar is. To that foundry, that's their livelihood. I'm their key customer. The moment that I can't load the train out to PE and sell manganese, I won't pay that foundry. That foundry will go down. There won't be a small, medium business anymore. We talk about beneficiation. We give it a nice ring to it. We're about beneficiation. We are the largest operator of a sinter plant in the Northern Cape in South Africa. Even in the world, it's one of the largest sinter plants in the world. You would think as government and as partners, we have thought about this to say, well, actually, how do we encourage that? Because what it means is I've got drives, I've got gearboxes. Today, a factory in Benoni, in South Africa right here, fixes those gearboxes, machines those gearboxes. The moment I don't perform, that factory goes down. Large industry is absolutely critical. If we look at the financial institutions, the IDCs, the PICs, etc., the development agenda sometimes gets lost in favor of how do we generate the next return from the best project. As a country, probably we need to reflect and say, are we really copying what the Chinese are doing, or we think we are copying it, but actually we are not.
No, thank you very much. And that probably segues very nicely to your area, because you are Business Unity South Africa, and you heard how the Black Business Council's sort of perspective of how business is sort of divided into black and white and so on. What do you think can be done today, what they call lower hanging fruits, the stuff that can try and just unlock quickly what you mentioned, the vaccines, which is probably a very good idea to get out of the pandemic. But as we know, the pandemic found us already in a very slow growth area. What can be done immediately, urgently today? Boom.
So BBC is a member of BUSA. Today at 1500 hours together, we're meeting the president of the country to talk about this very same thing. So number one, I think we have to defeat this coronavirus pandemic, because there were three components that we should have emphasized. One is saving lives, preserving livelihoods, but the way you break the link between the coronavirus cases and deaths is through vaccination. The second thing, we need to accelerate our economic growth. You can't celebrate 1.2% positive GDP growth, even though it's good news because 2 consecutive quarters means we're out of the recession. But if you did that as business, you'll be missing the mark, because population growth is 1.6%, which means we are going backwards. But even if you did crude arithmetic...
Did you hear my question to the statisticians? Continue.
So even if you did crude arithmetic,
Yes.
and the emphasis is on crude,
Yeah.
suppose the interest rate is 6%, CPI is 3%. It stands to reason that you must grow GDP by 3% just to stand still. We're not even doing that. But I think what should...
But the Reserve Bank thinks that we are now we're set for a 5%, right? So
And-
that's good news.
Yes, over a full year.
Right.
But look at Q3 figures, because this is quarter two. So quarter two ended on the 30th of June. It doesn't factor in the 2 weeks in July of rampant looting, because that's going to wipe off this 1.2% GDP growth. Because remember, in KZN, we wiped off 20 billion GDP impact. And in Gauteng, 50 billion in the country. But the real tragedy is that this is jobless growth at a time that 11.9 million young people are not in education, employment, and training. But 17 million people are on social security. Only 16 million are gainfully employed.
Yeah.
When we said we're going to give people 350 temporary relief because of the pandemic, 13 million people applied, and we included 5.6 million. So when you include people who are receiving grants, that's 24 million people. So you can see that the math doesn't add up. It's another tinderbox that's waiting to explode. 2 last points. But in July, August, Eskom was still implementing rolling blackouts. That started in January 2008. In 14 years, we haven't fixed it. Hence the lowest levels of confidence, trust, and hope since the Second World War. Each time the lights go off, a day we lose 1 billion to 2 billion. We wipe off an entire percentage point. Lastly, the growth happens to be in what I would call, in the interest of time, financial services, where you don't create jobs in oversized and outsized impact. In mining, where we used to have 980,000 employees when we were the world's #1 gold producer. Today, there's 400,000. Not in agriculture or manufacturing. Agriculture, you don't need skills to work in the farms. It's not happening in ICT, where we can create the skills that we need for 4th industrial revolution. So we are in a hole, we're in a spot of bother. So I think when we see the president at 3 o'clock today, we'll say 2 things that if you do, we'll send a message that says South Africa is open for business. Stop cadre deployment and stop state capture.
Phuthi, do you think that mandating vaccinations will probably sort of nudge us along? Because now we were worried about lack of vaccines.
Yeah.
We were complaining that the West is hogging vaccines and so on. Now we've got them.
Yeah.
The gates are open. People are not walking in.
Yeah.
And we need people to be vaccinated so that the economy can then gain traction.
The reality is, you've got a choice whether you get vaccinated or not, but the world moves forward. So if you're not vaccinated, you don't get a vaccination passport, you're not going to be able to move forward with the world. That is your choice that you are making. So, you know, in South Africa, you've got the opportunity to be vaccinated, and therefore you should use that opportunity. And we are watching Discovery, and we are saying, you know, we are seeing what they are doing, because we would like to have something similar, where all our employees are vaccinated so that we can all work in a healthy environment and be able to do our work. And in our work, there's a lot of travel, significant travel. And so you need to have people who are vaccinated in order to do that. So vaccination is key.
We've got a question from those who are joining us via the internet, from Anthony Marv Wright Dices, or Marvi Dice. Forgive me for butchering your surname. Nkosi has been butchered many times before. Why South Africa has not ratified the government procurement agreement so that international companies participating in tenders do that within an internationally regulated environment? What do you think, Kganki?
Yeah, I wanted to say that name, but I don't want to double butcher it. But I think it's important for anyone who wants to invest anywhere in the world to understand the context of that country. If you go into China, you go there knowing how China operates. If you come to South Africa, you should do the same. And we've had so many people giving excuses. I'll call them excuses because the Triple B has been with us for a long time. Most of the people who are investing here or coming to invest here, they've heard about it. The DTI has got a full team that goes all over the world telling people how things are supposed to be done. So when you come to South Africa, you need to understand that we've got a certain history. And the history was created through legislation. And to change it, you have to change it through legislation. Because if you don't, if you leave it to the market, like we've left some of the things, I'll give for example, the telcos to the market. But when I go to my rural area in Limpopo, if I want to download the document, I must go on top of a mountain. Because we've left that to the market. The market does not go where there's no return on investment. So we have to legislate how public procurement is done so that it rectifies what was done through legislation to bring the majority of the people who have been excluded to participate in the economy to have a chance of participating. And we have to remember that we are trying to empower the majority, unlike in other countries like the US and Europe where they're trying to empower the minority. You can afford to delay that for a long period. But when we're trying to empower the majority, you have to do it as quickly as possible to avoid the ticking time bomb. Because if you don't do it as quickly as possible, one day people are going to say, but we've been very patient, 50 years down the line, nothing has happened. Let's do this thing ourselves. And where you find people who don't actually own anything, and we've seen it during the riots, that if you own an RDP house, you wouldn't want to go on TV and be seen looting because you think I may lose my RDP house. But if you've got nothing, you actually have nothing to lose. So if you see people running this way, you also run with them and see maybe there's hope there that I can get something. Imagine the 9 million people who are sitting at home doing nothing, some with degrees. When they see someone passing by there, they think, but let's go and see what's happening. So for me, that is what we need to deal with. And we need to deal with it as urgently as possible. Because those who are here, majority of us staying in gated communities, people will just come there. You've seen it. You've got security guards and you've got guns, police with guns. They did nothing. So we have to deal with the issues as soon as possible. So the reason why we have procurement legislations that are trying to deal with that issue is to try and avoid a disaster that is waiting to happen.
No, thank you very much. I've been asked not to discriminate too much and just offer questions to those who are online. Given that you woke up, drove here, and came here physically, you also have the opportunity to ask a question inside this room. Do we have a roving mic? Any questions for our esteemed panel? No question. Okay, I'll pick my old friend. George. Okay. George, I was going to go for Lulu Johnson because he looked like he wanted to say something behind that mask. Oh, suddenly the hands are coming up.
Okay.
How much time do we have? We can go for 10 minutes, I've been told. So brilliant, thank you.
Thanks,
Short question, George. Short.
Yeah, it will be very quick. Thanks, Milton. Thanks for the opportunity. A great panelist, leaders of business. Just a quick question. And maybe it's directed to my leader, Bonang. And Kganki, you can probably come in. You know, my question is the discussions that take place in NEDLAC. And as business leaders, obviously NEDLAC is social partners. What is it that is not done correctly in NEDLAC, that today we will keep on saying the economy is not growing. But we are party to the NEDLAC. It's not like you're talking from outside NEDLAC. You are party to the discussion with government. What is it that is not being done right? Because NEDLAC is a social partner discussion, and business is part of that discussion. Surely, that requires a serious introspection.
Okay, thank you. Can we take one more? Is that Clayson Monyela? Okay, behind the mask. I can still spot you behind the mask.
Apparently, it needs to be sanitized.
So that question was for you, Prof. So we hope the next one is for Mashudu, Kganki, or certainly Phuthi. I think it should be for Phuthi, Clayson, even before you ask.
I take the instruction. But I doubt it will be for Phuthi. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And let me appreciate the inputs by the panel. But Prof, shouldn't we be striving for meritocracy, as in selecting people on merit, whether they are cadres or not? Because I suspect the narrative that the ruling party or government of the day should ditch cadre deployment, we're never going to win that. Because governments across the world do that. If you are a political party, you run for elections, you get elected, it's on the basis of a manifesto, a program that you put before the voters. And the idea would be when you get into power, you must then be able to implement that. How do you make sure you put people that you can trust? However, perhaps the issue should be those individuals, whether they are cadres or not, should be on merit. Wouldn't that be the way to go, Prof?
Thank you very much. Okay. Should we take one last one, please? It's the last one. Because the answers have to come, and I know you heard about stats. We have, you know. So who, a lady at the back. Yeah, okay.
See, I'm fighting for women's rights here.
Yes.
We already have two gentlemen that spoke.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity.
I'm a feminist, as you can see.
So am I. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity, and I think the panelists really represented us. However, as an entrepreneur that is currently trading within the tough economic times of COVID-19 impact, I have not heard solutions. I've heard a solution that Mrs. Phuthi, Mahanyele presented with the training. I have heard in the mining sector, we are still reflecting. From the Business Council, it sounded like a reflection as well, because we should be talking, there are applications for funding. So again, it was a reflection to say we've got applications for funding that are still going to white people. What is the Business Council, the Black Business Council doing about it?
Thank you.
Do they have the statistics?
Yes.
And can we have a rebuild?
Thank you. We
moving
get
on
it.
from deflection?
Thank you so very
thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Brilliant question. I think in defense, I don't want to speak on behalf of Kganki. He's here. He can speak for himself. He did say they must pay people on time. That's a solution. But you can go for him perhaps later. Prof.
10 minutes, I can only give sound bites. So, because Kganki is my brother.
Yeah.
So we made 11 commitments as Business Unity South Africa. The 9th commitment says we'll pay small and medium enterprises in 30 days. So we are now tracking how many of our members are paying in 30 days and how many are paying in 7 days. But you see, we are also saying as business, especially big business, SMEs don't want our charity or CSI. They want us as customers, because 40% of the economic activities in the value chain. So if we can give you access to our value chain, I think you'll be wealthier to make the leather for BMW, to install the air conditioners and lifts at the Discovery building, not catering and toilet paper, and you never graduate just because you are black. Ntate Mohale, I agree with you. You see, if this ANC-led government was putting the best cadres in administration, we'll leave them alone.
Yeah.
But they are giving us absolutely the worst, as demonstrated by the weekend special. You see, if we had time, I would remind you how state capture works. It's not true that everywhere else in the world, by the way, they deploy caterers. They don't. I'll start with just 2 countries. Singapore, expelled by Malaysia after 40 years, they became one of the top 5 countries in the world in terms of per capita income. And they were driving only 3 things: meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty. So there's no doubt that this ANC-led government, not only did they practice state capture, but they stole the 500 billion that was meant for socio-economic relief because of the pandemic. Yesterday, the minister released a report that the 300 million that is meant for artists when they can't work was stolen by 5 officials in government.
Thank you there, Prof.
Lastly,
yes.
lastly,
Okay.
you see, where the party ends is the beginning of state and government. And that's where we need to forcefully insert ourselves. In the US of A, it doesn't matter whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, public administration is professionalized.
Thank you.
Busani Ngaweni is driving that now. We've been talking about it for 27 years. We need to implement it. Ntate President Tiaka, I was going to answer you, but I'm going to have lunch with you because Ntatong hata di corner.
Thank you. We have a question from the chairperson, Mamtandi Tobias. Brief question, we are up against it. After this, we will close this session. I know we will have more when we go to Vilagazi and elsewhere. We'll continue to talk. Please, ma'am. Yeah.
But we are here because we want to provide solutions. And I've made it clear from the beginning that all of us have a responsibility to market South Africa to be an investment destination. Now, we want to achieve beyond 5% economic growth, okay? We look at commodities that we are currently providing, and we need diversification. It's not, can never be limited to just vaccination. You vaccinate, but you still have these unemployed young people that needs to be part of the economic activities. Some said, well, this is what you're going to do. So we should be able to say, moving away from the financial services, diversifying our commodities, this is what we're going to be able to do because we create an enabling and policy environment as the state for you to be able to make business. And I've made a simple example. I said, we'll be dealing with 5 thematic areas at the expo: the agro-business, the technology business, the tourism, the small business, the trade and investment. So those are the thematic areas that makes an economy to grow. And this is the sector that can be able to say in the current conjuncture, this is the inputs we're going to make to break even. And this is what we have learned from others who were able to sustain local investment or foreign direct investment by investing in these specific commodities. If you can move here, having said so, then we'll be able to take stock whether we have created an enabling investment environment for you as business. So I don't know, I don't have the whole day, but I want to live here knowing that when I go there and say, we're marketing this business, this is what they are going to have, clear-cut deals in what they are going to do in the fiscal framework.
Thank you,
and
Chair.
then we know clear investments.
Your passion is fantastic on that question. Thank you so much. A brilliant comment and question. As we close, can I give Phuthi Mahanyele to give us one last response to Mam Tobias's question, and that will be the end of this session. Thank you so very much to all of you. Mashudu, thank you so much for standing in at short notice. Kganki, thank you so much. Always good to see you. My brother from another mother, thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, Phuthi.
Okay, no, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Chairperson, for giving us those comments. What I can say is that from our perspective as Naspers, in addition to what I already mentioned, we are also looking at small business. So we set aside 1.4 billion rand to invest into small businesses. And unfortunately, in the tech sector in South Africa, the small businesses are very small. So we've only been able to invest 400 million. We would have liked to have invested that 1.4 billion already, but, and put more capital in. But unfortunately, it's just the sector is still early stage. But it's on the back of that that I'd like to ask if we can make sure that legislation is also not impeding on that. The technology sector in South Africa is still small. China, the US, they are large in the world, and that's why they can afford to put in place the legislative frameworks that they have. But in South Africa, let's just, allow the space to grow. There is so much growth that we can get from the technology sector if we can just, create the space for it. But, the capital is there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, rebuild.